For those of a certain age and those of a certain nerdiness, the most exciting trip one can have out as a child was a trip to the arcade. Screw you, the beach. All you've got is a bit of water and some pebbles. You know what, they've got Afterburner and Double Dragon in that building nearby. Stuff you, I'm going inside. Arcade games were streets ahead of the games you had on your 8-bit micros. They were bright, flashy, and they were noisier than a Michael Bay Transformers movie in a nursery for children with ADHD. They were brilliant. Short-lived, brilliant fun, but something you desperately wanted at home. But your Spectrum just couldn't do that. Outrun looked like this in the arcade, and on the Spectrum it looked like this. Outrun? I could outwalk that Ferrari. But it wasn't all bad. Some conversions were decent, some were great. Sure, they didn't look like their bigger brothers, but sometimes they played just as good. Or sometimes even better. This video, a late response to Douglas Titchmarsh, highlights my favourites of the era. There were objectively better arcade conversions, such as Chase HQ, Rainbow Islands and Midnight Resistance, but these 5 were the ones I loved the most growing up. These, then, are my top 5 arcade conversions to the ZX Spectrum. Taito's Bubble Bobble is an iconic platformer. Cute little dragons try to encapsulate their aggressors in bubbles and then headbutt the said bubbles, which for some reason really F's up the bad guys to the point of death. If you see someone in a Zorb, don't throw thumbtacks at that Zorb, you'll probably kill them. That's what we get from this game. Do this loads of times over 100 plus screens and you'll eventually get turned back into your real self, which is a human that looks a bit like David Mitchell. Stuff that, I'd ask for an upgrade to the be like a proper dragon with fire and stuff. Plus, who could forget this jaunty brainworm music? Firebird's conversion of Bubble Bobble does capture the essence of the arcade game perfectly. While the main sprite is butt ugly, seriously, why did they do the reverse negative coloured dragon? Have him white with a black outline, it would look so much better. Having said that though, the game is brilliantly responsive, fast and dripping in bubble bursting charm. Not only that, but it's a lengthy challenge too, something a lot of other arcade conversions struggle with. Bubble Bobble is a brilliant conversion from the arcade original. A grand title indeed to kick us off. Tekken's Bomb Jack has a similar premise to Bubble Bobble. You're presented with a task, this time clearing up a ton of cartoon bombs that have been left around the world's favourite tourist trap landmarks, before progressing from your single screen environment to another of many, whilst being pursued by a variety of ground and air based enemies. Quite bubble bobbly. I always found the Bomb Jack villains though to be really creepy looking with their red eyes and cold metal angular frames. They look like absolute menaces, don't they? And to make things worse, you can't fend them off with any attacks, not even a bubble, because in this, all you've got is your buoyant calf muscles. Look at that, wahey! The vertical air on that blue-hatted bugger. Such graceful, leaping heft and gadaboutery. Elite released the Spectrum port of Bomb Jack And despite the black sprites on simplistically coloured backgrounds, it's as close as a 48K could get to the chops of its arcade brethren. The smooth and fast gameplay is completely intact, and they make a decent attempt at giving young Master Bombjack enough sprite frames to replicate his swift and agile movement from the coin-operated original. In less careful hands, you get the feeling that a Bombjack conversion could have gone very badly, but Elite's efforts here are beyond adequate. It's a game I've wasted more hours on than a 15-year-old boy has on X-Hamster. A brilliant game indeed. Play Bombjack today. On to the top three, and Green Beret, known by Cold War loving, Rusky hating 80s Yanks as Russian Attack. Yeah, clever wordplay there, Konami. Well, you're cast in the role of a tough nut in a slouch settee cushion for a hat, and you must go and rescue a load of sloppy POWs who clearly are not as good as you. They must have had a poor drill sergeant or something. Sent deep into enemy territory without any firearms, our eponymous Green Beret must instead reenact the sort of knife massacre that pro-gun NRA supporters suspect happen in London on a nightly basis. Green Beret is excruciatingly difficult though, with the Russian infantry relentlessly charging at you randomly and at a pace from both sides. Probably not worth your 10p unless you're exceptionally good at titles like this, as you'll be done quite quickly, and if you're in a chip shop and mum's chips aren't quite ready yet, you'll be standing there kicking your heels or doing that thing that 3-year-olds do where they pretend they're playing the arcade game but they're actually not. Imagine Software did the honours of the Spectrum version of Green Beret, and wow, it is good. Even the artwork by Bob Wakelin on the game box is exciting and action-packed. The difficulty level is still pitched very high, but you know what, you've got all the time of the world. You own this game, you can play as many times as you like. It's on your Spectrum right there. The limitations of the Spectrum hardware often work in its favour with this title. The reduction in enemy sprites that cause you so many complications in the arcades is a boon for you and for the length of your game, as is the hit detection on your knife, which is far more forgiving than the arcade one, and so once you embed it into the chest cavity of poor old Private Sergey, you know you're done. You don't actually have to hit directly where they want you to, like in the arcade. I think this is one of those games that I've enjoyed much more than its arcade parent, and really, look how much tougher the Spectrum version of Green Beret is than his arcade buddy. Look, the fella is so tough that a simple slash at a guy's ankle completely fillets him out of his entire body, so he's just left being a skeleton. What a tough guy he is. I'd never really played Spy Hunter in the arcade prior to making this video. I just knew that I adored the Spectrum version. So I was intrigued, to say the least, to play this for the first time. Oh boy, it's blisteringly fast. Not to mention incredibly unforgiving. You can even crash into your own previous wreckage. I really struggled with the game as a whole, initially with the whole default MAME controls, as there's buttons all over the shop. But I can see the quality of this title. Undoubtedly I can, but there's no doubt in my mind it's overshadowed by its home conversion, such as the one we're talking about right here, right now, the Spectrum one. And that is for one reason: simplicity. There has been a fair amount removed from US Gold's home version of the Bally Midway Classic, but it makes it for a more intuitive experience. You drive and you shoot until you don't have any time left. That's it. The famous boat transformations are far more frequent The amount of weapons may have been streamlined, but there's still the odd encounter with a strafing helicopter that's bothersome. And overall, it's excellent fun that has that vital one more go factor. It must be frustrating for this alt-world Bond that he can't stop this endless car chase to jump out and impregnate all manner of foreign lady spies. But at least he could still, crank his gear stick still. Eh? At number 1, we have Renegade, an effort by my favourite forgotten arcade beat-em-up pioneers, Technos. An early entry into their popular Kuni-kun franchise, Renegade is the prototype for where the Technos team would go next, Double Dragon. Renegade looks dingy, which is a compliment in this instance, setting the visual groundwork for the scrolling beat-em-up genre. The game has an interesting control method, which Technos would revive for Double Dragon 2, with buttons that attack left and right specifically, with moves contextually based upon which way the main character is facing at that time. Renegade is a tough challenge, and its place in beat-em-up history is assured and vital. I will say though that playing on MAME has revealed one thing. Those guys weren't wearing balaclavas, were they, in the Spectrum version? Good grief. Renegade on the Spectrum benefits in much the same way as Spy Hunter did. It simplifies the gameplay according to the limitations of the hardware and its control system, and ends up superseding the source material in terms of playability. Make no mistakes, Renegade on the Spectrum is superb. Gone are the left and right attack controls, replaced with a control system that requires expert timing and deft control from the player. The Kuni-kun visual style has been replaced by a more Western aesthetic, and it works just as well, with a level of detail in the visuals that looks terrific for the old ZX. Don't get me wrong, Streets of Rage 2 or Turtles in Time are more playable in terms of control and the amount of moves, but it's almost as playable in its own right despite the hardware limitations. Imagine can be proud of taking an alright, almost average arcade machine and making it into an all-time Sinclair classic. One of my favourites on the system that inspired the computer-exclusive sequel that is almost as good old Target Renegade. Let's not mention the third one. And there we are. Thank you Douglas for his ideas, subscribe to his channel and also contribute your own efforts and responses, and we will see how we get on. There's some I would like to have put on here obviously, but there's never enough numbers between 1 and 5, is there? Come on somebody, make some new numbers up in between 1 and 5. That's it for today. Okay, thanks, bye.